Thank you, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here, and I'm very honored to speak on behalf of my ambassador and on the Embassy of Colombia. It is, as I said, a real pleasure of being here in this very special occasion with Colombian film director Ciro Guerra. We are very honored with his presence in Australia and in Canberra for the first time. Before we start, I wish to thank all the people who made this cultural project of the Embassy a reality. First of all, I want to start by Ciro, thanking him for taking the time to come to Australia and being with us. Lina Foti from Crayworks, who had helped us to organize all these events. Mr. Adrian Ma, president of the ANU Film Group. Brett, thank you very much. Nick, thank you for your support. Dr. Elizabeth Meyer from the Australian National Centre for Latin American Studies. And Dr. Louise Sheedy for the National Film and Sound Archives, who is going to moderate the Q&A. It is with their support and the plan of promotion of Colombia abroad that we can put all these projects together. Today's exhibition is The Wind Journeys, Los Viajes del Viento, which is the second feature film for Ciro Guerra. It's a coproduction drama, Colombian, German, Argentine, and Dutch coproduction drama, written and directed by Ciro Guerra. It was filmed in 80 locations in Northern Colombia, and it uses Spanish as well as other native languages, such as Palenquero, Wayunaiki, and Arhuaco. So you will get a little bit of the taste of the northern part of Colombia. I want to invite Ciro over here so he can tell us a little bit about the movie. And please welcome him with a round of applause.
Thank you, María Teresa, for this introduction and for your assistance throughout this visit to Australia. It's a great pleasure to be here for the first time. Thank you all for coming. I'd also like to give a special thanks to the ambassador, the Colombian ambassador, and all the team of the Colombian Embassy for making this possible. It's been a very interesting week of getting in touch with the Australian film industry and the way films are made and shot and distributed in Australia. It's been an eye-opening experience in many ways, and hopefully we can start to create networks that allow our films to flow in both directions more easily. I also like to thank Lina Foti for all her support throughout this week. And just a few words about the film that you're about to see. This is a film that was a lifelong dream of mine. The region that we're going to see depicted in the film is the region where I was born and where I grew up, and so it's a very personal film for me. It's a film that deals with many issues of culture, of also family, and the way of being in the world that belongs to us. So it was a film that for a long time appeared. It was very different than anything that had ever been attempted in Colombian cinema at the time. So it was a big risk, a big gamble, and it was possible largely to the great effort and belief of the film's two producers, the beautiful Cristina Gallego and Diana Bustamante, which I love, and they really put an effort to make this film a special film, and we managed to live a great adventure traveling throughout all the northern part of Colombia and sharing it with you. Just keep in mind that what you're going to see in this film is not all of Colombia. It's just a little tiny part, but it gives you an idea of how rich and diverse the country as a whole and the Caribbean region is. The music that you were going to hear is vallenato music. It's a very special kind of music that puts together all the souls, different souls of Colombia. It's African heritage, it's European soul, and it's indigenous music roots. So the way that this music is able to bring all these elements together was a very important source of inspiration, and hopefully it will be a source of inspiration for you too. I will be here at the end to discuss any questions that you may have, or if you also want to hit me with something in case you don't like the film, but hopefully you will. Thank you very much and enjoy.
Hi everyone, as Brett said, my name is Louise Sheedy. I am here to have a chat today with the wonderful Ciro Guerra. So can I have a round of applause for this beautiful film? So we have a couple of roving mics going around, and so we might have a little chat, but of course I'm sure there's a number of things that have made questions and comments sort of bubble up in your mind, so please feel free. I'll indicate in a moment. But gosh, where do we start? I think 80 locations, 4 languages in there, is there?
Yes.
Yep. So you like to make just things very easy for yourself as a filmmaker. Could you perhaps talk? I know you're from the north of Colombia, but I can imagine even so that you would have learned a lot about your own country even doing this. It's like a huge expanse of area and the challenges would have been enormous.
Yes, it was a voyage of learning for me and for the team that made this film together. Yes, it was I spent about a year and a half of research, during which I learned many things, you know, and many. The film just kept finding new ways, and it was a constant discovery of new pathways and new stories, you know. So it was a very enriching experience, and this is I think one of the main things about Colombia is that it's a country that is still hasn't been told. You know, it's a country with many stories to tell. And it remains unknown even to most Colombians. So there's always something you just dig up a little, and there are always wonderful stories and anecdotes and characters popping out of under every rock.
And with that, I think with those number of stories, I mean, you know, with any kind of road movie, you start thinking about Homer's, you know, Odyssey, or the Faustian myth with the devil and these kind of universal myths. But I wondered, as I was journeying through with the movie, like how many, you know, Colombian myths and narratives that I'm missing, and perhaps wanted to ask you if there was a particular either Colombian mythology or particular sort of fragment myths that we wouldn't know about.
Yes, one of the starting points of the film is a Colombian piece of Colombian mythology, which is the story of Francisco el Hombre, an accordion player who was sort of one of the older minstrels, and what common folklore says is that he had a musical duel with the devil, and he eventually. He was walking around. He was on his donkey riding around in the path, and this was a region of Colombia that was very incommunicated, even all the way into the 20th century. I think the first road into the region was built in the 1930s. Yeah. So the only way of communicating, in many ways, was the minstrels. The minstrels who use songs and use stories to tell. The news from other places and the stories from other places. So this storytelling was a way of communication, very valuable and very appreciated by the people. So amongst one of these men was so-called Francisco Moscote Guerra, and the story goes that he had during one of his wanderings he met an accordion player who challenged him to a musical duel, and as he said yes, and as they started having this battle, he realized that the other accordion player was the devil, actually, the devil incarnate, and this fight went on for several days, and in the end he defeated the devil by singing the creed, the prayer, you know, the Catholic creed.
Yeah.
He sang it backwards, and the devil couldn't answer to that. So that's how he defeated him. And so basically, it was a starting point. It's a mythology that is assumed to be a Colombian myth. But then, during you do research and you realize that this story about the musician coming up against the devil is very common in many other mythologies. You know, you have it even in tango music. You have it in Balkanic music. You have this story of Nicola Paganini, who allegedly sold his soul to the devil, and it all goes back to the myth of Orpheus. Orpheus, in a way, was the first one to descend to the realm of the dead, you know, which is the devil's kingdom, to rescue his wife. So such a universal myth like Orpheus, transformed into such a local myth, was fascinating to me, and it was a great starting point. So yes, the story borrows from mythical structures that have been used forever in storytelling in order to build the story that we see.
I think it's beautiful the way, because you see so many different places, so many different people, but it does, you know, it's a very multitudinous kind of landscape, but there's a real smoothness, or I just noticed with, say, the editing and the cinematography is such, it almost felt like breathing. There's this real smooth kind of pace through it all, and I was thinking about that with the music as well. It kind of, I take it the story that's weaving through, just how to put it really, but it was just thinking about your collaboration with your cinematographer and with your editor and sort of how you wanted to communicate that. I guess it is just this very smooth kind of transition between all different places.
Yes, we wanted to communicate one thing that was important to us, which was this is the music of peasants, you know, of uncultured men or you know, unstudied musicians who were really, whose source of inspiration was nature, and who have a deep relationship with nature, and music. The music they make is sort of an expression of that relationship with nature. So it was important that you could see nature in all of its strength throughout the film, you know, because that's what's the most important thing to them. These are men of the earth, and also this. It's a bit for these peasants in this region of the country. They live a very contemplative life in a way. You know, it's funny because there's this idea in the rest of Colombia that the people from the Caribbean are very loud and keep partying all the time, but it's a myth, really. It's when you go deep into and you share time with the peasants of the region, you realize that it's a very contemplative life, and of course music brings joy and brings and there's a lot of things that come through it, but really it's a very how do you say it's a life in which they contemplate nature profoundly, and they have a strong relationship to it. So we wanted the movie to sort of be faithful to that pacing. So there was no point in trying to make it like a Hollywood blockbuster pace, you know. We wanted the film to feel natural to the rhythms of the environment that these men have lived in and which inspires them.
That's certainly successful. That's my favourite thing about this movie. It feels beautiful. It's a real experience. Is there a significance with the sharing the surname with the surname with his master?
No, it's a coincidence.
Okay.
Like I said, there are many minstrels of the region who happen to have my same last name.
Okay.
So if a person who's really, and people who are really into this music, they can tell, you know, the original Francisco El Hombre was nicknamed Guerra. His surname was Francisco Moscote Guerra. And there's many like Sebastián Guerra or El Chiche Guerra. Where, you know, it's a very common last name, and it happens to be my last name too. Okay. But it's a coincidence.
Good to know.
Yeah, no, there are no actors. There are no professional actors in the film, actually. Maybe there's one. There's one, but most of them, all of them are really people from the region and peasants and musicians and real musicians. The main actor is very well known as a composer. He has composed many of the most famous songs of this genre, but all of the musicians are played by real musicians, and we basically, when we were looking for the characters for this film, we just wanted to have faces that told stories by themselves. You know, that the face was so because I believe that faces can tell stories too. Yeah, of course, sound was fundamental to this film. We made a decision early on that all the music will be played live on the film. So there's no background music or incidental music. All the music you hear is the music that you see. So the rest of the time, what we wanted to do was to create a texture of sound that would be sort of faithful to this idea that nature is the inspiration for this, because the sound of the accordion is really imitating. It was used to imitate the sounds of birds, and for the accordions, the wind is all. For the accordionists, they have this very poetic relationship with the wind. You know, they say that the accordion is basically all it does is play the stories that the wind brings them. You know, and sort of and the region in which the film ends, it's a region in which the wind is tremendously powerful. It's really when you go to the Guajira region, the northern part, the wind is really something special there, and so in a way the film is a journey towards the wind, and towards that wind that feeds the music that these men. So yeah, what we wanted to do was to be very faithful to the environments, to the natural environments. So we did a lot. We recorded a lot of sound on location, and then when the sound designer did some really beautiful things, which is, for example, there's a lot of the wind that you hear. A lot of it is natural wind, but there's also wind that comes from inside the accordion. There's wind that is created that is not, you don't respond to it as music, but there's always an accordion in a way creating or working with the wind that you hear. And so yeah, for us the wind was essential, but also what we did was we sort of kept usually in films you put the dialogue really on in the front and the backgrounds and the sounds in the background. What we did was sort of the opposite. So the environment is really powerful, and the dialogue is always takes a little bit of a step back. Yeah, those are all things to create a sense of what you were saying. Yeah, there's a story that's like I'm not sure if it's true, but it's the story that people accept. Is that there was a ship full of accordions was headed from Germany and it was heading for Argentina or something, and then the ship wrecked in the Caribbean, and all of its accordions literally flowed into the scene, and so many of these men who were used to sing joining their songs with flutes, these traditional gaitas and guitars, suddenly found accordions lying around, and so they started incorporating it into their song. It's a story that has a lot of myth in it, but it's a nice way of
pretty great.
It's pretty great, yeah. And there are people who have who claim that they can prove that it's true. It's a true story, but you know.
But to this day, nothing solid.
Mm-hmm. No, basically, I was just thinking of doing a reaction shot, and I just explained to the actor the situation, and I realized that there were a lot of feelings involved in that scene, you know, and but then we just said action, and the boy started crying, and I was pretty surprised by that. But then in the editing room, I thought, you know, but there is really a lot of emotion going on in that scene, and you cannot really explain it, you know. it's the last time he's going to see him. You know, he knows it. He knows that the journey is over for the both of them, and so yeah, it's and maybe he got what he wanted, maybe he didn't. He doesn't know. It's a moment of great confusion. And the process of learning is usually romanticized in films, but we all know that learning is a really tough process, and it involves a lot of loss and a lot of leaving behind in many ways. So yeah, it's a very complex moment. So we just decided to go with the actor's emotion, and and also with the audience's interpretation. When I was doing research, I kept hearing about this tale, about the story about a village that was on the water. You know, that it was built on the water, and that there was no land. There was a village with no land in it. That all the fishermen essentially had made a village in the middle of the water. And they said jokes, you know, that every house was a corner house in this place, and this looked like a really mythological place. But then I went and saw it, and I was very impressed by the place. I think it's really an unbelievable place. But I was even more impressed by the story of what had gone on in this place, which is a place that was victimized by violence during in the year 1999. The paramilitaries took over and they did a huge massacre. They slaughtered about 40 fishermen. So this village, all the people from the village were displaced, and they went to dry land, and they tried to live in there. And this village was deserted for a few years. Until the fishermen came back, because they couldn't find themselves living on dry land. They tried, but they couldn't. So really this moment is what happened there is really, you can really, when you're there, you feel like it's a moment that really broke. It's like a turning point for the village and for their lives, and I was very and the story of, you know, of this endless cycle of violence that these people have endured, and is something that that scene is sort of a meditation on that. Mm-hmm. Yes, it wasn't easy, because they are very protective of their land and they are very closed off, because of course they have been subject to great mistreatment over several centuries. So they have this natural distrust of anyone who comes. But it was literally a process of a year, talking to them and explaining to them what we wanted to do and what cinema was. And so they went and they met and they discussed, and they decided that they saw cinema as a way of letting people know about who they are, you know, and that they exist, and that their culture is still there and it's valuable. So they wanted to. They are in the process of starting to open up to the world, and because that's the way. They feel that is basically the only way that they can be protected for the future. So and their main goal, their main purpose in life is the protection of the Sierra Nevada. You know, it's their spiritual homeland, and it's the heart of the world in their culture. So, in order to do that, they need people to know about them, and so after the film they started a process of. So they asked us to teach them how to use cameras and how to. And they started making their own documentaries, and they are more interested now in getting people to know about their culture. But before that, they used to be very, very closed off to the rest of the world, and they are still very wary of foreigners. But they are peaceful, and they are an extraordinary culture, which hopefully hopefully will remain for a long time.
I've been really proud of the ANU Film Group for putting on this film and cooperating, and the help we had from María from the University of Colombia. But that film did win many awards. It was nominated for the Best Foreign Film Oscar in 2009, I believe. I think that's the first screening in a cinema in Australia. So I'm curious to see how well it was shown in other countries. So I might try and talk to Ciro about that when we have the drinks, which is going to start in just a minute. I'd love to spend 20 minutes with Ciro here telling you about what he's been doing, what he's going to do. We had the pleasure of showing Embrace of the Serpent at the end of 2016, and that was a film that made the last 5. It was a shortlisted 5 finalists out of 81 films that were nominated for the Best Foreign Film Oscar last year. We showed that last year, and that was very different from that. I believe that Ciro is in post-production work on a film called Birds of Passage, which is his most ambitious film to date. It's a film noir, a western, somebody said. I can't find a trailer of it. It's like a gangster film, but something completely different from any gangster film that you've ever seen before. So that's in post-production. I hope we can show that at the ANU Film Group when it comes out. And those of you that aren't members of the ANU Film Group should become members of the Film Group. And then the next one is going to star a fellow called Mark Rylance, who many of you have seen. If you don't know the name, you'll recognise the face. And it's a political thriller in the tradition of Joseph Conrad. So this man has much creative juice in him, and having seen the 2 that I know of, I'm really looking forward to the next 2. If you'd like more information on those films, if you've got more questions about the one you've just seen, please join us out through the doors at the front there, turn left, Headley Ball, and there's some nibbles and drinks there. So again, please thank Ciro for his time.
Thank you very much.